Hello, friends, and welcome into episode number 78 of the Lou Sports Talk podcast. I am your host, Ethan Hannaford. He is Dylan Hampel, back for episode number 78. We're going to be, first off, starting with some Cards talk, as we have been in large part as of late. Almost Blues season. We're going to be mixing in some of that conversation. No, Brandon's been bouncing off the walls, ready to have the talk going regarding the St. Louis Blues, but not quite there yet, coming soon. And then we'll be wrapping the episode, the latter half of the episode, I should say, having TJ Williamson, our football correspondent, on. I think he said he wants to be called the football guy. Our football guy, TJ Williamson, he's going to be coming on. We're going to be recapping some of the headlines from week 2 in the National Football League. Are the Chiefs in trouble? Joe Burrow to the IR. Go Pack Go. As a Vikings fan, I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth. I feel sick to my stomach. My family might even disown me for those 3 words coming out of my mouth. But let's go ahead and let's start with some Cards talk. The most notable, I think, headline over the last several days, Dylan, being, you could argue even further than that, has been the wait for Nolan Arenado, the Cardinals at one time perennial all-star, even MVP candidate at one point, returning to the lineup. He finally did on Monday night against the Cincinnati Reds, and albeit it was a disappointing evening for St. Louis, in large part due to the struggles in late innings from the bullpen, Nolan Arenado had a pretty solid evening for himself, returning going 2 for 4 with a run scored, an RBI, a double and an RBI, and a solid night offensively. I know he had on Tuesday night, the last I had checked, sacrifice fly as well. We know it's been a disappointing season in large part for Nolan Arenado, but regardless of anything, and it's not like this is a surprise, Dylan, but you knew Nolan Arenado, being the gamer that he is, was going to do anything and everything that he could to get back out on the field and to finish the season on a high note.
Yeah, this was definitely the most significant injury we've seen Nolan Arenado have in a Cardinals uniform. He missed, I believe it was 40 games. The last game he played was in late July, so definitely some significant time missed from that right shoulder strain that was caused in part by the changes he had made to his swing following a finger injury. So one injury unfortunately cascaded into another for Nolan Arenado, and he has missed a very significant, about a quarter of the season at this point now, but has returned to the lineup, like you said, and had a productive evening last night, going 2 for 4. But what do you think is there anything he can really bring to the Cardinals lineup, you think, at this point? Or is this purely a Nolan Arenado being a gamer situation, like you said, Ethan?
I think more so than anything, what Nolan Arenado, at this point, Nolan Arenado has a 664 OPS in 2025. It's not like this guy is bringing a prowess right now to where all of a sudden your lineup gets that much better, because it doesn't. By the numbers, it just doesn't. But I think what it does bring back is an experience, a level of experience that there just isn't a lot of right now in the clubhouse. I know Wilson Contreras has that, but Nolan Arenado, I think you could argue even to a level above that. Maybe not. But so I think that in general is good for young players to be around. And we know that Arenado, for a good chunk of that time, wasn't in St. Louis. He was not doing his rehab in St. Louis. So I think it's good just in general for him to be able to be back around the players with the defense. Will make things better on the infield. And he still doesn't strike out a lot, so the ball's going to be put in play a little bit more. Not necessarily saying that, like I said, the offense is all of a sudden going to magically improve, but I think there are still some pros and cons, absolutely, to Nolan Arenado being around. There's I think 10 games left-ish by the time you're watching this, probably. So it's not like we're going to see this play a massive difference or a change in what things look like for the Cardinals outside of that. Nolan Gorman's not going to get much time at third the rest of the year. They're going to have to figure out how to fit him in there. And Arenado, he's going to get the majority of the starts to finish up the year at third base, and hopefully he can finish out 2025 on a high note, because I do think to a certain extent it does matter. But I'm curious, is there anything else that you would argue that Nolan Arenado brings to the lineup, to this roster when he is around?
Not in addition to what you already said. I think he definitely is a plus defender still, and brings that leadership aspect like you talked about. I think if anything, we can get more into this as the offseason comes into being in the next couple of weeks. But I think if anything, this is a chance for Cardinals fans to maybe see Arenado one final time in a Cardinals uniform. In my opinion, I think this offseason, how he is handled and how the Cardinals and incoming front office change in Chaim Bloom, how they navigate Nolan Arenado and his contract and everything that's gone on the past year plus with Nolan Arenado in regards to, is he staying in St. Louis? Is he getting traded? I think how the front office navigates that is going to be one of the top priorities, if not the top priority, coming in. And so I think, if anything, this is a chance to see Nolan Arenado play some games as a Cardinal once again here at the end of the season. Would you agree with that, or is that something you think is more, we'll see when the offseason comes?
I mean, listen, it's tough because you love Nolan Arenado. You don't love necessarily offensively what he's been able to contribute here the last 2.5 seasons. But here, the reality is that the direction in which the St. Louis Cardinals are heading, in the direction in which Nolan Arenado is wanting to head at this point, are drastically different. I wonder if Nolan Arenado had the choice, if he would change his mind as to how he navigated last offseason and rejecting rejecting the trade to Houston. The Cardinals had a deal done, and Arenado said no. He said he didn't want to go to Houston. Totally his right, but he said no. And, you look at what the Houston Astros are doing right now. They're 82-69. They're a half game back of Seattle for the AL West crown currently, or division lead, I should say. And they have the third wild card spot, and they're only a game and a half back of the first wild card spot. Meanwhile, you have the Cardinals, who, while not mathematically eliminated, they're out of it. They're not going to be a playoff team this year. And man, you look back at what this year has been for Arenado, and it feels like that would have been the best decision for him at that point in his career. St. Louis, you can't entirely blame him. St. Louis has given such terrible messaging, the organization, I should say, to him since he got here. It hasn't been in large part accurate. And once again, it was mixed messaging this past offseason, where you knew they were going to want to give some young guys some opportunity, but they also wanted to compete at the same time. So maybe Nolan is going into 2025 thinking there's a better chance that they win. Maybe he's just okay with them taking a step back, knowing that, he's got a kid now. Maybe he's more so comfortable staying here, staying planted, rather than going somewhere else, unless it were to be one of those 5 spots. I'm speculating right now, but part of me wonders, for a guy that has been such a hardcore competitor, one of the best competitors in the league the last 10 years, if he looks back at any point and says, man, what could have been? Now, you don't get to the level that Nolan Arenado is at simultaneously with looking back and questioning decisions. So, that, like I said, that's pure speculation. But as far as what 2026 is going to look like, it just doesn't feel like there's a world in which this makes sense, both for the Cardinals and for Nolan Arenado. Now, we don't know what his no trade clause situation is going to be like. We don't know if it's going to be 5 teams again. Perhaps he's willing to open that up further. But those are going to have to be questions that are answered in the offseason. I can tell you this much. In no world for the St. Louis Cardinals, does it make sense for Nolan Arenado to be on this roster? That's not a slight against him. I have the utmost respect for Nolan Arenado, the player and the person. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, the direction in which the Cardinals organization is heading just does not align with where Arenado is at this point in his career, past his prime offensively. And when you consider how much money he's making right now, it just doesn't make sense for St. Louis to have that contract on their books. The question's going to be, how far is ownership willing to go to not have Nolan Arenado wearing Cardinal red in 2026? How far are they willing to go? If Arenado has a 5-team, if he is willing to waive his no trade clause for 5 teams, and you're not able to make a deal with one of those teams, what do you do? Are you willing to waive Arenado? I don't know if they will be. Are you willing to take pretty much all of his salary for the rest of his contract in order to get him to move on, or in order to get a team to bite that he wants to go to? These are questions we're going to have to figure out come off season time. Traditionally, the Cardinals have not been a team that has eaten salary for players that aren't on their team. So it would be uncharted territory for this ownership group. But, you look at, like I said, the direction that this team's heading, it doesn't make sense to keep him around. You have to move on. You got J.J. Weatherholt coming on. You already don't have room for Nolan Gorman because Arenado's there now. Yeah, it's time to move on. And I don't see a world in which it makes sense to have Nolan Arenado on this roster come 2026.
And I don't blame him either for exercising that no trade clause. Like you said, that is his right, and he is owed a total of $31 million over the next 2 seasons in what will be his age 35 and age 36 seasons. So I agree with you. It's disappointing that the Cardinals over the past 2 seasons, I don't want to eulogize his career in St. Louis before he's played his final game,
Sure.
but it seems like the Cardinals will have had to part with 2 likely Hall of Fame players in the last 2 seasons in Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, with a combined total of 0 wins during their shared tenure here. 0 playoff wins during their shared tenure here. And it's just another tough pill to swallow for Cardinals fans, and it's going to be another righting of the ship, so to speak, that Chaim Bloom is going to have to try to take on, of getting back to the old ways of Cardinal baseball. For me, looking back on the potential tenure of Nolan Arenado coming to an end here in St. Louis, a word that comes to mind is disappointing. Is that how you would describe it, Ethan? Or how do you reflect on Nolan Arenado's now 5 seasons in St. Louis?
Yeah, I think more so what could have been, right? Yes, Arenado never performed in the playoffs, so to a certain extent, maybe that's on him. But yeah, I think disappointing, what could have been, are good ways to put it. The Cardinals had 2 pieces in Goldie and Arenado, as you mentioned, where, man, you had a core right there in which you could have done something. Unfortunately, you didn't have, regardless of that, the DNA, the support system coming up from the minors to really help you to that next level. And money was only going to cover it up for so long before you recognized what the big issue was. So disappointing, yeah, what could have been. Arenado and Goldschmidt themselves, especially Goldschmidt, right? I mean, a phenomenal tenure with the Cardinals despite his last season. Arenado a little bit different. I think his 2021 season was unlike himself. 22, we know, top 3 in MVP voting, and then he started to kind of tail off and exited his prime in the second half of 2023. So Arenado, I think, maybe a little bit more disappointing, but I think more so just looking at the tenure of those 2 guys and the Cardinals' lack of ability to take advantage of it. That's, I think, more so what hurts. And it doesn't mean, though, I should say this, because I want to get back to this real quick before we bring TJ on here, Dylan, is these last handful of games. Some people out there might be wondering, why? Is there a point? Why not just keep him on the IL the rest of the year and just move on? Because here's the reality. These games matter for Nolan Arenado, I think, to a certain extent. One, for him to be able to get back out on the field and be able to do the thing, but also for executives around the league. At this point, don't you want to see that Arenado still has that he can still play ball, that he can still swing, provide offense, play defense? I think so. It's not a guarantee that Arenado is not a Cardinal in 2026. That doesn't mean they won't try, but they tried in 25 as well. I think it's going to perhaps be even more difficult to trade him this upcoming offseason than it was last year. While it is a small amount of games, I think that it is true that what Nolan Arenado does in these next 10 games could have a certain amount of impact on how teams view him. Are teams, based off of what he does this year, going to say, oh my gosh, Nolan Arenado, he's back, perennial MVP candidate, that's the guy we're trading for? No, that is past. That's in the past. But I think that executives could look at this and say, okay, he's proven that he still has it to a certain extent. That Nolan Arenado of old, there's a piece of him that's still there. Maybe I'm stretching, but I understand the importance of what these handful of games could mean for Arenado and the ability to try and use that as leverage to trade him. So I say, hey, he looked pretty good in those last 10 games. He responded well following his injury. He has spoken as a learning lesson for him how to not go about playing with injury. And you hope that doesn't happen again for him. So I don't know. My thought is, could it hurt? Is it going to hurt? Is it going to make the situation any worse? If your argument is, well, Nolan Gorman's losing 10 games of playing time, I mean, yes, but if it's at the expense to potentially help you trade away Nolan Arenado, I think you're willing to take that. Would you agree with that, Dylan?
I would agree. I would say the only real potential negative that could come out of this would be a major injury, which knock on wood won't happen. But it's not like this is a team in a playoff push that Nolan Arenado is actively a hindrance to. They are out of it, as you said, and so
yep.
I don't really see any negatives either. It's a hopefully a somewhat proper send off for his tenure here in St. Louis, and yeah, like you said, can show GMs around the league that he's still healthy and he's back from that injury and is able to play at a major league level once again.
Yep, you said it right there. I think we, at least for now, maybe we put a little bit of the icing on the cake, because like I said, so many of these conversations that we are having are almost like the part 1, right? Or maybe they're the part 5, but there's going to be 15 parts, because there is still a lot of questions, and there's going to be updates come off season time. We remember how busy and active things were regarding the talk around Arenado last offseason. I imagine it's going to be probably relatively similar, because this has to be task number 1 for Chaim Bloom, is finding a way to trade Nolan Arenado, in my personal opinion. Has to be the number 1 thing. We're going to take a quick pause. When we return, a recap of week 2 in the National Football League with our football guy, TJ Williamson. It's right here on the Loose Sports Talk podcast. Welcome back to the Loose Sports Talk podcast. I am Ethan Hannaford. He is Dylan Hampel. And if you see, there's now a third member on the screen. It is the one and only certified football guy, TJ Williamson. TJ, welcome back to the pod. We've missed you, but we're excited to be able to get some ball talk, some football talk. The last time we talked, I don't think that the NFL had gotten underway. And here we are 2 weeks in. There is already plenty of headlines. Before we dive into any of those headlines. Would love to get a fantasy football update from you on how Team TJ or TJ United's going. How's that going so far?
I was really hoping you weren't going to bring this up. It's
Brutal.
fitting that Dylan is wearing a Chargers jersey. I stayed up watching the 9 p.m. Chargers game, wanting Marion Hampton to get me 5 points to beat my roommate in fantasy football.
That seems like it would have been likely to happen.
Yeah, but I got 3.5 points, so I lost, and now I'm 1-1. I'm fraudulent in this league. I'm gonna play Ethan next week, so I should be on next week, I think. So I'll let you guys know if I beat Ethan, and then it'll be a really funny role reversal.
It could always be worse. You could be Dylan, who is one of the maybe two teams that looks worse than yours.
Too soon.
So
it's not over.
Throwing darts out here everywhere at you too. Gee whiz. So let's go ahead and let's dive into some of these headliners. One of the biggest ones, I think, that you could argue up to this point is the injury that Joe Burrow experienced on the field against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I believe it was in the second quarter when he went down awkwardly and all of a sudden can't put any pressure on his, I believe it was his right foot. Don't call me. Don't call me on that, please. Dylan's shaking his head no, like it was his left foot. Was it his left foot?
Yes, it was.
No, it was his left foot. I lied. It was his left foot, but comes down with turf toe. Second player in 2 weeks, second quarterback to come down with turf toe. Brock Purdy being the first one last week, and now Joe Burrow, who is heading to the injured reserve, which means he'll be out at least 4 weeks. They mentioned surgery like it could be a possibility. Last I had seen, they hadn't said if that was for sure going to happen, but there's talks that Joe Burrow could miss up to 3 months from this turf toe. What a massive blow, not only to the Cincinnati Bengals, but to the league as in general. Burrow, a fan favorite, one of the best quarterbacks out there. We know how lethal he was in 2024. This is a massive blow, TJ.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the stat sheet doesn't look incredible, but the first week, preseason is kind of less and less of a thing people really care about. So you take into account the week one's kind of a warm-up game. Week two started to look like, I think he had 78 yards and a touchdown on 7 completions, so averaging like 10 yards a pop. And then, ironically, he kind of popped. And from that point forward, Jake Browning took over. I think he had 3 interceptions, 2 touchdowns. They ended up winning the game, but left a lot to be desired out there on the field for sure.
Dylan, you mentioned before we hopped on here that you would. Well, first you grimaced. You made this face, and I was like, "What are you looking at?" And you mentioned that you looked up what turf toe looks like. Is it not pretty?
No, and I'm glad you asked that because I was probably like many other NFL fans, or when I saw the news, I was like, "What? How do you hurt a toe and you're out for
looking at
that
it.
Sufficient of an amount of time?" Don't look it up. It doesn't look pretty, but
you should have told me.
Just for the layman out there, to preface, I'm not by no means a medical doctor, but according to what the internet has told me, if you're playing on turf, especially, is when you're more prone to get this injury. It is a sprain of the big toe joint, not your actual big toe itself, but that big thick one right at the base of your big toe. And when it happens when you hyperextend or jam that joint. And so there are 3, as far as I understand, 3 different grades of a turf toe, 3 being the highest. And that's what Joe Burrow has, which means it's a complete tear of his soft tissues in that foot. And it's going to be very hard for him to just to bear weight on that foot. So that's why, you think of a quarterback, how much you're moving around any position in football, really. But that left foot, and it's the same leg actually where he tore everything in his knee his rookie year. So this is a very significant injury, and you see turf toe and you don't really understand how you can miss that much time. But I think it's typically a 12 to 14 week recovery if it's a grade 3 sprain, which is what Joe Burrow experienced.
Yeah, Ethan, at what point do you just get rid of the toe? Probably better for the whole state of Ohio if he just gets rid of that toe.
How far is Joe Burrow willing to go for the state of Ohio? I mean, I say the state, they have 2 football teams, but they basically don't. It's basically for the entire state. How far is Joe Burrow willing to go? I'm with you. I saw that thing off, baby. Chop it off.
Get the man a scooter.
I'll say this much, and this is a huge blow. I think what Jake Browning was able to do was encouraging. I'm sure for Bengals fans. Fun fact: they got the Vikings this upcoming week, and JJ McCarthy's out, so it's going to be, my thought is that fans paid thinking they are going to see JJ and a young quarterback with a lot of potential and a really loaded Vikings team face off against one of the best quarterbacks in the league. You got JJ, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase. Who's going to be the better one? And now you got Carson Wentz and Jake Browning battling it out at quarterback. Wow.
Couldn't have written it better myself.
My deepest sympathies to all my fellow Vikings fans out there. Tough scene. But I also saw this. I just briefly mentioned this. I saw that there have been talks about the Bengals trading for Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston to Jamar Chase would feed families. Families, I tell you.
I'd be so confused. He'd be throwing touchdowns everywhere. Touchdown to Jamar, touchdown to T. Higgins, touchdown to the other team. He'd be throwing touchdowns everywhere. Every dang place he'd be throwing touchdowns.
I'd be okay with that so long as that means that Kirk Cousins returned to Minnesota.
Oh, hey, now we're talking. Now we're getting somewhere.
You don't want that, Ethan.
I know. They just actually picked up Desmond Ridder today, and he's their new third stringer. So we have it's Carson Wentz, Max Brusmer, and Desmond Ridder, the Vikings.
The envy of the league.
You hate to see it. Let's go ahead.
I will say, Joe Burrow being out, they're not in my playoff picture anymore. Like, I don't have them in the playoffs anymore. Would you guys agree?
I mean, it's hard to disagree at this point. I mean, if he's out for 3 months, that's 12 weeks, is it not? Is my math correct there? I mean, that's the large majority of the season. I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on if they do trade for a quarterback they feel a little bit better about than Browning. But yeah, I mean, they have a lot of skills. So if they were to go out and be able to, if they give up a fifth for a guy like Jameis Winston or someone like that, maybe they can float around the playoff picture until he gets back. So I don't know if I'm as sold as you are that they're out of it, but the odds aren't good. There's a lot of work to be done. If it wasn't for the skill room that they have, which is it's a loaded one, then I would say it's going to be tough. But especially if they get someone, they need to get someone probably that's experienced. A young quarterback is not going to do it right now. We know that Joe Burrow gets pressured more than basically anyone in the league, and that's not a young quarterback's not going to handle that well. So you need to get someone that can handle pressure like that. And but either way, not good right now for the Cincinnati Bengals fans. Let's go ahead and let's jump to the local team. I guess it's the local team. I don't know, but
not my team.
I know it's not your team. It's not mine either. It's none of our teams. But let's go ahead and let's take a look at the Kansas City Chiefs because they are 0-2 to start off the season. Lost in Brazil to start off 2025 with a 27-21 loss against Dylan's Los Angeles Chargers. Well, they're not really his team, but he happens to be wearing their jersey right now. We can, I guess, talk about that later. But and then last week, a tough loss at home against the Philadelphia Eagles by a touchdown. And the offense has really just struggled to click these first couple of weeks. And I think that fans are a little bit concerned. Do they have a right to be, TJ?
I think they're a little spoiled, Ethan. I think Chiefs fans are a little spoiled. Let's take a trip, okay?
Okay.
Does anybody know off the top of their head how many games the Chiefs won by one score last year?
No, I don't. Do you?
It's a lot. It's a lot of games.
17?
Yeah, 19? Yeah. It's all of their games were won close. They barely ever blew anybody out. And now that they're 3 points behind instead of 1 point ahead, the fans are going berserk. I think the fans that are going berserk are the ones that are probably, I don't know, reading too much into the headlines. Like, for example, Ethan, we have the Cardinals fans from like 2 years ago that were getting really, really upset because Wilson Contreras wasn't hitting the ball a certain way, or, his catching style. People were saying he shouldn't be a catcher anymore, but At the time, he wasn't doing anything wrong necessarily. People were getting really upset. And there was one side of Cardinals fans that was saying fire him or trade him immediately. There was another set of Cardinals fans, you two in this chat here, they were saying, no, he's a good player. Let's keep him. I think similarly, Chiefs fans, if they lose another game, they might start freaking out. But I still think they're in a better position than Joe Burrow and the Bengals would be if they had a healthy Joe Burrow.
Oh.
Like, I think the Chiefs are still going to end up finishing higher than a potential Joe Burrow-filled Bengals. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
Dylan, your thoughts?
I would say pump the brakes, Chiefs.
Dylan, your thoughts?
Yeah, and just for some quick clarification on the jersey I am wearing, I was a Rams fan like many others, and then once they left, I did not want to switch to the Chiefs. I respect those of you who were there before and are not bandwagons, but I didn't want to root for a team on the other side of the state, so became a Saints fan, and then Drew Brees left, and they've been miserable, so I'm still a Saints fan, but there's not much to cheer for there, so I also like to pull for the Chargers and Jaguars, 3 fan bases that have endured a lot of misery. So great choices by me. But anyway, Chargers had a good win against the Raiders in Vegas Monday night. But as far as Chiefs concerned, I'm with you, TJ. Pump the brakes. I mean, if I were a Chiefs fan, I would be more concerned this season than I would have been in years previous. It'd probably be like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 on the panic level because, I mean, nothing about this team is really elite besides Patrick Mahomes. They can't really sustain pressure on the quarterback from the defensive side of the ball in just a 4-man rush. I mean, Steve Spagnuolo is having to send the house just to get to opposing quarterbacks 6 or 7 blitzers at a time, and that's not a sustainable recipe for success. Their offensive line play has been inconsistent so far to start this season, and obviously the injuries to their wide receiver room we don't need to go into, and they really don't have much of a running game established yet. Isaiah Pacheco has not really bounced back to his pre-injury self from 2 years ago, and so 2-3 years ago. But all of that to say, you look back at the Chiefs roster the last 2-3 seasons, they haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver since Travis Kelce in 2022. And what have they done in those 3 seasons? Won the Super Bowl, lost the Super Bowl. So they've still made it very far without a 1,000-yard receiver a 1,000-yard receiver in their room. And I mean, they still find a way to Mahomes magic through it, but I will say this upcoming schedule before they get Rashee Rice back, they still have 4 more games before he's off of suspension. They're going to play at the Giants, who have a very formidable defensive line, at home against the Ravens. They go to the Jaguars and then are at home against the Lions. So not exactly a guaranteed 4 games for the Chiefs, and the schedule doesn't get easier after that. They still have to play the Ravens and the Bills later on in the season, as well as the Chargers. So if I was a Chiefs fan, I would be concerned.
And the Commanders.
But not panic. And the Commanders, thank you, yes.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that would worry me, if I'm a Chiefs fan and my sights are set, I can't think every Chiefs fan is probably thinking Super Bowl or bust every year based on recent success. And so if your logic is Super Bowl or bust, Chiefs fans should know it's a long season. Most of the time, whenever you have these back and forths at the beginning of the year, the Eagles, probably the Ravens, probably the Bills, and the Commanders later, those games actually come back to bite the other team that actually won. Usually the comeback game or the second game in the series goes to the opposing team if it's a really close neck-and-neck battle. But one of the reasons, Dylan, that Chiefs have been able to get away with not having 1,000-yard receivers is because their running game has been good. Mahomes has made timely plays, and they have been very clean when it comes to mistakes and not making a lot of penalties happen on their offense and defense. I haven't been paying as much attention as far as penalties are considered, but you can't have Patrick Mahomes be your leading rusher with under 100 yards for your 2 games. I'll also say this. They play 2 good teams. These are 2 good teams. They will see the Chargers again in the playoffs should both of them make it. And there's a good chance they'll see the Eagles in the Super Bowl if they make it. So, again, I just think they have a lot to fix, but I have no doubt that Andy Reid will be able to help.
Attached with that, and Dylan, you bring up the strength of schedule. It is a tough schedule, and not even – and you mentioned both pre-Rashee Rice returning and post, but there are some formidable teams on this schedule, and TJ, I think you brought up a really good point that this Chiefs team was – you look at last year compared to this year, what's the big differences besides that they haven't been able to finish these two games against two very good teams. What's the big difference? Are they going to be able to revert to, typical Patrick Mahomes-esque style like they did last year? And in some of those games, they had some fortune, right? It feels like there's always a call or two that favors, or, they had the blocked kick as time expired against the Broncos last year. There were several games like that. So, you look back, and I think it's a really good point. How many of those games could have very well resulted in the Chiefs instead being 9-8 last year? A fair chunk of them. Now, there is something to say about having a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who is so good in the final 2 minutes of a game. And in both of these games, he's been playing from behind multiple possessions come late. Are the Chiefs able to stay in games enough to give Mahomes and company a chance with 2 minutes left on the clock to go ahead and tie or take the lead? And up to this point, they haven't been good enough. They've been playing catch-up too much.
I also think people are not – you look at the roster and the Chiefs have been to the playoffs. They've had sustained success. But you're also – you're kind of sizing them up. You're like, really, this is Super Bowl champion Chiefs? Like, they don't look that good. And they don't do any one thing, so they're very good about game planning for each individual opponent. Now the opponents have 2 years of tape on them, and they know exactly what to do. They know that if the Chargers have a weak receiving core, Chiefs defense is going to attack in this way. So now the Chargers know how to combat that, and they did that by just being hyper-aggressive at the beginning and leading the entire game, forcing them not to be able to run and having Mahomes be their leading rusher. So there's a lot of science behind it, but I just think a lot of teams have their number, and if you're making it close, the Chiefs typically end up coming out on top, but it's only natural that they don't win every single one-score game.
And just to wrap up the Chiefs in the AFC West, how about the Chargers up to this point? Boy, have they been impressive. They were lights out defensively on Monday Night Football against the Raiders. I mean, Geno Smith and company couldn't get anything going the entire game. Looked very strong against Kansas City. And Jim Harbaugh finally has Justin Herbert firing on all cylinders. He has looked, I would argue, the best he has looked in his career through these first two games. And if that's the Justin Herbert that you're going to be getting in 2025, then I don't care what the Chiefs end up doing. There's way more talent on the Chargers roster from top to bottom. But if Justin Herbert, this is the version you're getting of him, then we may have a new king in the AFC West.
There are people saying the Broncos are going to win the division too. So there's a lot of competition still to be had in that division.
Let's go ahead and move on to the NFC North, where and I think this was prior to it was prior to the Micah Parsons trade that we had our projections. And I don't remember which of us all had the Packers in the playoffs. I don't know if I did. I projected a 9-8 finish, I think, or 10-7. I think I projected 10-7. And then they go and they trade for Micah Parsons. And boy, oh boy, has that changed everything. I think part of me even underestimated how good Micah Parsons was. And then you see the Packers on the field against two playoff teams from 2024, the Lions and the Commanders, and they make them both look like little sister. I mean, talk about just dominating performances both on offense and defense. I think they're allowing 240 total yards per game through those two against two very formidable offenses with a lot of skill and talent. What have you guys seen? I'll start with you, Dylan, from the Green Bay Packers that has made them oh so impressive through the first 2 weeks of 2025.
Yeah, and to touch on preseason predictions, I had them winning the NFC North and as my 2 seed in the NFC pre-Micah Parsons trade. So I've been on this train for a long time, but what's made them so incredible is that obviously this is a potentially generational defense. With the addition of Micah Parsons, it just frees up so many other players, not only on the defensive line, but in their secondary, to where quarterbacks are having to force throws out quicker, and they aren't. In a way, it eliminates the deep threat, which is something that the Packers have struggled with in years previous. And now Micah Parsons isn't allowing that time for quarterbacks to get their deep look that they're going for. And so he's only played 2 games so far, obviously in a Packer uniform, and a total of 79 snaps. And he already has a sack and a half. And last game against Washington, he led the team with 8 quarterback pressures. And I mean, you can put him anywhere on the defensive line. You can put him in the middle, but he's better off the edge. But through these first 2 games as a whole, the Packers defense has allowed a total between 2 games, a total of 379 passing yards and 97 rushing yards between weeks 1 and 2. And like you said, shut down 2 top 5 offenses from last year, number 1 and number 5, respectively, in Detroit and Washington, who averaged 33 and 28.5 points a game. And they allowed 13 to Detroit and 18 to Washington. So it's been night and day from last year, which had already been a big improvement from years previous under that last year, first year defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley.
Yeah. The defense is great for sure. That's really the main reason that they should be the team to be feared. They give me a lot of Chiefs vibes on offense from last year. Josh Jacobs is good. Don't get me wrong. He is not running the ball like Raiders Josh Jacobs that went off and was like the number 1 rusher in the league. They don't really have a top tier wide receiver 1. They have a bunch of guys that would be wide receiver 2s or 3s on a bunch of other teams. But the scheme is so good that these tight ends and these receivers are getting open, and they're not letting Jordan Love get outside of himself. A lot of question marks going into the year about, is Jordan Love legit enough to carry a team? He doesn't have to. Jalen Hurts didn't have to last year, and they beat the Chiefs. And I think this year, similarly, Jordan Love and the Packers don't have to rely overly on their quarterback. But I did find some interesting stats about another team from last year that had similar stats. And I just want to play a quick little game with you guys. We're going to go team 1, team 2. You just tell me which one you'd pick, okay? So team 1 through the first 2 games of last year had 91 total points over 2 games. Team 2, being the Packers, had a total of 54 points. I assume you guys would want to have team 1. Team 1 also had a total of 620 yards, 178 of it being rushing, 42 first downs, and the Packers had 670 yards, 213 rushing yards, 31 first downs. So pretty similar stats. The first team I was talking about was the New Orleans Saints from last year. Throughout the first 2 weeks, they lit the league on fire. Everybody said they were going to be Super Bowl contenders after 2 weeks. And from that point forward, it was like a long, sustained fart going down the drain. And so all I have to say, 2 weeks are important. The highlight of this whole 20-minute segment of NFL that we're talking about that I would say is the Packers aren't going to win the Super Bowl this month. They're going to win it in February if they win it. The Chiefs aren't going to not make the playoffs this month. They're going to not make it later. I mean, I guess if they go 0-4, that'd be a pretty big hole. But you get my point.
What about the Bengals?
What about the Bears?
No chance. No chance, either one.
Although I think it should be said that teams that start off 0-2, their odds to make the playoffs drastically decrease. It's not common. It's not common for teams to start 0-2 to make the playoffs. Now, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't think it would surprise anyone if they still made their way into the playoffs, but it will be a tough trek to work their way back, especially when you consider the schedule that they have. The Green Bay Packers looking very good through 2 weeks, but I think it's a great point, TJ, is it's been 2 weeks, and that should be considered throughout all this. TJ, you are the man. We appreciate you, and we look forward to having you on next week for college football talk. We'll have some debriefing to do. Both our local teams here, the Illini, traveling to face Indiana on the road, and then Mizzou hosting South Carolina. So there'll be plenty of headlines to discuss and break down following week 4 of college football. We appreciate you joining, man.
Thanks a ton, guys. Appreciate it.
We'll take a quick pause, and then we'll wrap things up with what to look forward to this week right here on the Lou Sports Talk podcast. We wrap up now, episode number 78 of the Loose Sports Talk podcast, giving you a bit of a taste at what is coming up this week in the St. Louis area. The Cardinals currently their last homestand of the year, Dylan. Big sad.
Go see Nolan Arenado while you can. That is what I will say. Go see him. Tell him you love him. Give him some applause.
Final series, home series, coming up this weekend against the Milwaukee Brewers, and then they'll wrap up the series next week against the San Francisco Giants and Chicago Cubs. So I believe as we're recording, 11 games remaining-ish, somewhere around there. So won't be long before we are in the postseason, and the Cardinals will not likely be there. The odds are very low at this point, not mathematically eliminated, but be sure to keep up with all the St. Louis Cardinals content right here on STL Sports Central, Card Central 365 every single day, and then the Card Central postgame show as well, where you can find me very often on both of those shows, and would appreciate it if you gave it a look. What else do we got? We got Illinois and Mizzou. Illinois and Indiana facing off next Saturday night. Boy, Illinois and Mizzou, that would feed families.
Bragging rights?
That would feed families too. No, the arch rivalry. Have some respect, won't you? Gee whiz. Illinois, number 9 in the country, 3-0. A beatdown this past week of Western Michigan. They'll be facing off against the 19th ranked Indiana Hoosiers on the road. Indiana coming off of a, check this, 73-0 win over Indiana State. They haven't played anyone yet up to this point, so it'll be interesting to see how their Hoosiers come out in their first test of 2025. That one's on Saturday at 6:30 on NBC, and boy, that'll be a treat. Looking forward to that one, Dylan.
Yeah, Illini so far on track to get to their 10-win season, but it is very early, and you never know what can happen in a Big Ten rivalry game. So
amen to that.
We shall see. And I'm rooting against them because I'm a Mizzou fan. But
let's go ahead and let's talk about Mizzou for a moment. They will be hosting the South Carolina Gamecocks. Kickoff at 6:00 on ESPN. South Carolina, a massive loss this past week against Vanderbilt, thanks in large part to their quarterback Lenore Sellers going down with a concussion. They drop out of the top 25. They were ranked, and now they're not. And Mizzou is a 13.5-point favorite. How insane is? Oh wait, it's changed since. They are now a 10.5-point favorite. They were a 13.5-point favorite, and the matchup predictor is giving Mizzou an 80.2% chance to win that game. So boy, would that be big for them to be able to pull off to walk away with a win in that one. But we'll have to go ahead and wait and see. Illini Central and Mizzou Central postgame right here on STL Sports Central following both of those games. So be sure to keep a close eye on both of those contests. As far as St. Louis City goes, well, they will be this upcoming weekend on the road facing San Jose. St. Louis City coming off of a 2-0 win against Montreal CF, that one will start at 9:30 on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV Plus, and City Central postgame show will be right here on STL Sports Central. A reminder that all of the content here on STL Sports Central is presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Dylan, appreciate you joining me for episode number 78. It has been a pleasure, and I look forward to I don't know when we're having you back. I think 2 weeks. We'll have you back on in 2 weeks. So appreciate you joining as always.
Always a pleasure, Ethan. MIZ.
There you heard it right there. He's Dylan Hampel. I am Ethan Hannaford. This has been the Loose Sports Talk Podcast, episode number 78. That's a wrap.